Amelia Carter never imagined betrayal would sound so quiet. No shouting. No dramatic gasp. Just the soft click of a hotel door opening and the sudden, crushing stillness that followed. She stood there, one hand instinctively moving to her belly, 7 months pregnant, her body heavy with life and hope. She had rehearsed this moment in her mind differently. A surprised smile from Julian. An awkward laugh. Flowers maybe. An apology for working too much. She had driven across the city believing she was fixing something. Instead, she found her husband seated on the edge of a bed that was not theirs. Julian Carter, millionaire, visionary, the man everyone admired, froze when he saw her. His face lost its color as if all the blood had drained in a single second. Beside him sat a woman Amelia had seen before, once or twice at corporate events. Perfect hair. Bare shoulders. A confidence that came from knowing she didn't belong and not caring. Time slowed painfully. Amelia noticed everything. The discarded jacket, the second wine glass, the faint imprint of another woman's perfume clinging to the air. Her heart pounded so loudly she thought they must hear it. Julian opened his mouth. No words came. Amelia waited for something inside herself to break, anger, hysteria, tears, but instead there was a strange clarity. A calm so sharp it frightened her. In that moment she understood something fundamental. If she spoke now, she would lose control. And control was the one thing she could not afford to surrender. She looked at Julian once more, then at the woman beside him. No accusation. No pleading. Just recognition. Then she turned around. Each step toward the door felt deliberate, heavy with meaning. Julian finally called her name, panic seeping into his voice, but she didn't slow down. The door closed behind her with a soft, final click. That sound marked the end of her marriage, and the beginning of something Julian would never be able to undo. Amelia walked through the hotel lobby like a ghost among strangers. People laughed, talked, lived, completely unaware that her life had just shattered. The contrast was surreal. She stepped outside, the cool air hitting her face, grounding her enough to breathe. Her phone vibrated inside her purse. She didn't check it. She already knew. The drive home passed in a blur of traffic lights and memories. Julian's excuses for late nights. His sudden trips. The way his hand no longer lingered on her belly when the baby kicked. She had sensed something was wrong, but she had trusted him anyway. Trusted love. Trusted history. At home she didn't collapse. She didn't cry. She moved with purpose. She packed one suitcase. Only essentials. Legal documents. Medical records. Jewelry her mother had given her. She ignored anything tied emotionally to Julian. Those things no longer belonged to her life. She paused in the bedroom, resting her palm on her stomach. The baby shifted gently beneath her hand. That small movement anchored her. This wasn't just about betrayal, it was about survival. By sunrise, Amelia was gone. No note. No confrontation. No explanation. Her silence was not confusion. It was resolve. Julian Carter had always believed control was something permanent. Something earned once and held forever. The kind of power that came with wealth, reputation, and a name people respected. That illusion shattered the moment he stepped back into the penthouse the next morning and felt how wrong everything was. The silence hit first. Not the peaceful kind, this was hollow, echoing, accusatory. The house felt stripped of warmth, as if Amelia had taken the air with her. Julian dropped his keys on the marble counter and stood still, scanning the space. Her coat was gone from the hook near the door. Her shoes, only a few pairs remained, lined neatly, not scattered in haste. That detail unsettled him more than if the closet had been emptied in chaos. He walked into the bedroom. Her side of the bed was untouched, made too neatly. The dresser drawers were half open, revealing careful absences. Documents were missing. Not sentimental items. Not photos or keepsakes. Practical things. Julian's chest tightened. She planned this, he muttered under his breath. He grabbed his phone and dialed her number again. Straight to voicemail. The calm, automated voice infuriated him. He sent a text, "We need to talk." No response. Another, "This isn't what it looked like." Even he cringed at how pathetic that sounded. He tried again. Voicemail. Julian paced, dragging a hand through his hair. Amelia had never ignored him before. Not once in 7 years. She always responded, if not immediately then thoughtfully. Silence was not her habit. Which meant it was intentional. A flicker of fear crept in, subtle but sharp. He opened his laptop, scrolling through recent emails, suddenly hyper-aware of how often Amelia had been copied on financial communications. She had asked questions. Smart ones. He had brushed them off, amused by her curiosity, confident in his superiority. "You don't need to worry about that," he had told her countless times. "I've got everything handled." The arrogance of that memory burned. His phone buzzed. For a split second, relief surged, until he saw it wasn't Amelia. It was the woman from the hotel suite, asking if he was okay, offering to come over. Julian stared at the screen, then tossed the phone onto the couch like it had betrayed him. Her presence now felt dangerous. If Amelia had left quietly, she hadn't done it in confusion. She hadn't done it in shock. She had done it with clarity. And clarity, Julian realized too late, made her unpredictable. He began calling people, her sister, her closest friend, even her doctor's office, under the excuse of concern. Polite refusals. Vague answers. Closed doors. They were protecting her. That's when true panic set in. Julian sank into a chair, heart pounding, as a single thought repeated in his mind. She knows more than I ever thought. And for the first time since building his empire, Julian Carter felt exposed, truly dangerously exposed, while the woman he had underestimated vanished with his certainty, his control, and the upper hand firmly in her grasp. The room Amelia was staying in was small, quiet, and unfamiliar, yet it felt safer than the penthouse ever had. The walls were plain, the furniture modest, but the air was calm. No tension. No anticipation of raised voices or cold looks. For the first time in weeks, she could breathe without bracing herself. She sat near the window, one hand resting on her belly, the other wrapped around a mug of tea she had barely touched. Outside, the city moved on like nothing had happened. People crossed streets, cars honked, life continued, unaware that hers had taken a sharp, irreversible turn. Her phone lay face down on the table. She hadn't checked it. Not because she didn't care, but because she did. Too much. Every instinct in her told her that if she read Julian's messages now, she would doubt herself. And doubt was dangerous. Instead, she let her mind settle. Memories surfaced, quiet ones. Moments when Julian had dismissed her questions with a smile that felt more patronizing than loving. Times she had been included in conversations only as an accessory, not an equal. She remembered standing beside him at events, praised for her elegance, never for her intelligence. She remembered realizing, slowly, that she had been shrinking herself to keep the peace. Her baby shifted gently inside her, and Amelia's throat tightened. "This ends with me," she whispered. She stood up and opened her suitcase. Inside were neatly stacked folders she had packed without hesitation. Insurance papers, property records, copies of contracts Julian had once left on the dining table, financial summaries she had quietly downloaded months ago. At the time, she hadn't known why she felt compelled to keep them. Now she did. She spread the documents across the table, reading each one carefully. Not emotionally. Methodically. She made notes. Highlighted inconsistencies. Marked questions. The fear she had felt earlier transformed into focus. Every page she reviewed reinforced one truth: she had more power than Julian believed. And more than she herself had believed. She thought briefly about confronting him. About demanding explanations, apologies, promises. The image dissolved quickly. Confrontation would give him space to manipulate, to twist the narrative, to regain control. Silence had already done more than words ever could. Amelia picked up her phone and scrolled to a number she had saved years ago but never used. A lawyer her aunt had once insisted she keep, just in case. Amelia had smiled then, certain she would never need it. She pressed call. When the voice on the other end answered, Amelia didn't hesitate. Her tone was calm, clear, and resolute. She explained everything, not emotionally, not dramatically, but factually. Dates, details, documents. There was a pause. Then the lawyer said, "You did the right thing by leaving quietly." Amelia closed her eyes, feeling something settle inside her, a sense of alignment, of certainty. The path forward wasn't easy, but it was clear. She wasn't reacting anymore. She was choosing. As the call ended, Amelia placed both hands over her belly and allowed herself a small, steady smile. This wasn't the moment she broke. This was the moment she took control. Julian walked into the law firm expecting damage control. He told himself this was still manageable, that Amelia had acted out of emotion, that once she cooled down, things would return to their familiar imbalance. He wore his confidence like armor, tailored suit, steady stride, the practiced expression of a man used to winning. That confidence began to fracture the moment the lawyer slid the first document across the table. Julian frowned, scanning the page. His jaw tightened. "What is this?" "Protective filings," the lawyer replied calmly. "Initiated by your wife." The word wife landed heavier than he expected. Julian flipped through the pages faster now. Asset protections. Ownership clarifications. Temporary restrictions. Each paragraph felt like a door closing. He recognized his own signatures on older documents, things he had signed without thought, without imagining they could ever be used against him. She can't do this, he said sharply. She doesn't even understand how. The lawyer interrupted him, voice even. She understands perfectly. That was the moment Julian realized the shift had already happened. Amelia wasn't reacting. She had prepared. While he had been distracted by ego and indulgence, she had been paying attention. Every clause, every technicality he had once dismissed as irrelevant now stood between him and control. He tried to push back, threats first, then bargaining. He mentioned his influence, his connections, the damage this could cause. The lawyer listened patiently, then responded with something Julian wasn't used to hearing. That won't matter here. Julian's pulse spiked. He felt cornered in a way that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with exposure. Amelia hadn't attacked him publicly. She hadn't demanded apologies. She had gone straight for the foundation beneath his feet. And it was working. When he left the office, the city felt different. Louder. Sharper. Less forgiving. For the first time, Julian understood that power wasn't about who spoke the loudest or threatened the hardest. It was about who moved first, and quietly. Amelia had done both. And the balance Julian had relied on for years was no longer tilted in his favor. It was gone. The fallout didn't explode, it crept. That was the most dangerous part. At first, Julian noticed only small shifts. A delayed callback from an investor who usually answered on the first ring. A meeting postponed until further notice. An assistant hesitating before entering his office, as if choosing words more carefully than before. He told himself it was coincidence. Then the whisper started. Not loud enough to confront. Not public enough to defend against. Just quiet enough to undermine him. Industry blogs began hinting at internal instability within his company. Nothing explicit. No names. But Julian recognized the tone immediately. It was the sound of people circling, sensing weakness. He checked social media obsessively, expecting Amelia's name to surface, waiting for an accusation, a post, a statement, something he could counter. There was nothing. Her silence unnerved him more than scandal ever could. Behind closed doors, partners asked pointed questions. Are there ownership disputes we should know about? Is there any legal exposure involving personal matters? The phrasing was always polite, always professional, but the implication was clear. Trust was eroding. Julian assured them everything was under control. But control was exactly what he no longer had. The woman who had once accompanied him to charity galas, smiling quietly at his side, was now a shadow no one could ignore. People began asking where she was. Why she wasn't appearing. Why her absence felt deliberate. The mistress, sensing the shift, grew distant. Invitations declined. Messages left unread. The luxury that had once bound her to Julian now felt uncertain, unstable. She disappeared from his life with the same ease she had entered it, leaving him with consequences she never intended to share. Internally, Julian's company felt the pressure. Legal teams flagged concerns. Financial officers urged caution. Deals that once closed on handshake confidence now required exhaustive review. Julian felt scrutinized in rooms where he had once dominated effortlessly. And still, no word from Amelia. No interview. No accusation. No public retaliation. Just quiet, strategic absence. That absence reshaped everything. People began to draw their own conclusions, and those conclusions were far harsher than any statement could have been. In the corporate world, silence often meant guilt, or worse, control. Julian finally understood the brilliance of what Amelia had done. She hadn't attacked his reputation. She had let it collapse under its own weight. And as the world adjusted its perception of him, one truth became unavoidable. Amelia Carter no longer needed to speak to be heard. Her silence was already doing the damage. The hospital room was quiet in a way Amelia had never experienced before, calm, focused, purposeful. The lights were dimmed, the curtains half drawn, and the steady beeping of monitors blended into the background like a reassuring rhythm. She lay back against the pillows, breathing carefully, one hand gripping the side rail, the other resting on her belly as another contraction passed. Julian was not there. The thought surfaced briefly, not with pain but with clarity. She had made this decision weeks ago. When the nurses asked who should be listed as her emergency contact, she hadn't hesitated. When they asked who would be in the room during delivery, she answered with a quiet certainty that surprised even herself. "I'm fine," she had said. "I'm not alone." And she wasn't. A close friend sat nearby, offering silent support. A nurse moved with calm efficiency, speaking to Amelia with respect, not pity. No one questioned her choices. No one asked where her husband was. In this space, she wasn't defined by abandonment or betrayal. She was simply a mother bringing a child into the world. As the hours passed, Amelia focused inward. On breathing. On strength. On the life she was about to meet. Pain came in waves, but fear did not. That part of her life had already been faced and conquered. When the baby's cry finally filled the room, sharp and alive, Amelia's chest tightened, not with grief but with overwhelming relief. Tears slid silently down her temples as the nurse placed the warm, fragile body against her skin. "Hello," Amelia whispered, her voice breaking for the first time in weeks. In that moment, everything else faded. The betrayal. The silence. The legal battles. The public consequences. None of it mattered as much as the tiny heartbeat pressed against her own. Julian learned of the birth later, through channels that were no longer direct. A message passed through lawyers. A single line of information, stripped of emotion and access. Mother and child are healthy. That was all. He wasn't invited. He wasn't informed in real time. He wasn't needed. Amelia held her baby close, feeling a peace she hadn't known she was capable of. This was the boundary she had drawn, not out of cruelty but out of protection. The past had no place in this room. This beginning belonged to her. And Julian's absence was no longer a wound. It was a choice she stood by fully and without regret. Julian first felt regret in the quiet moments, those small, unguarded spaces where distraction failed him. Late at night, when the penthouse lights reflected off glass and steel and made the place feel colder than ever, he found himself replaying scenes he could no longer change. Amelia standing silently in the doorway. Her calm expression. The way she had walked away without a word. At first he told himself it was temporary. That she would reach out eventually. That silence was just another phase, something he could wait out like he had waited out every conflict before. But days turned into weeks and weeks into months, and Amelia never broke it. Her absence reshaped his life in ways he hadn't anticipated. He noticed it in the smallest details. The way the house echoed when he came home. The untouched chair at the dining table. The nursery door that remained closed. The space inside it belonging to a life he had been excluded from by his own choices. Regret settled into him not as sharp pain, but as a heavy, constant pressure. Professionally, Julian's confidence never fully returned. Even when deals went through, there was hesitation now, a second of doubt before every decision. He found himself wondering how Amelia would have assessed the situation, what questions she would have asked. The realization stung. She had always seen more than he gave her credit for. He tried once, only once, to send a message that wasn't an apology or a demand. He typed carefully, admitting fault without excuses, acknowledging harm without justification. He stared at the screen for a long time before sending it. There was no reply. That silence again did what words never could. It forced him to sit with the truth instead of negotiating his way around it. There was no version of events where he was the victim. No angle that softened what he had done. Occasionally he caught glimpses of Amelia through others, brief mentions, indirect updates. She was doing well. She was focused. She had moved forward. Each piece of information carried the same quiet finality. She no longer needed him, and she had no intention of revisiting the past. Julian came to understand that regret wasn't about losing her, it was about losing the version of himself he thought he was. The man who believed he was in control. The man who thought love would always wait. It wouldn't, and it hadn't. Regret became the one consequence he couldn't negotiate, buy, or escape. It stayed with him, steady and deserved, a reminder that silence, once chosen, can be permanent. Years had passed since that day Amelia had walked away. In that time, Julian had tried to reclaim normalcy, but the echoes of her absence haunted every decision, every conversation, every boardroom encounter. He had rebuilt some of his empire, repaired his image in the public eye, but inside, a quiet emptiness lingered, a constant reminder of what he had lost. It was at a charity gala that their paths crossed. Amelia had arrived quietly, elegantly, carrying herself with a presence that required no announcement. Julian, attending for business reasons, spotted her across the room. For a moment, the world seemed to narrow. Everything else, the clinking of glasses, the chatter of guests, the flashing of cameras, faded. Amelia's eyes met his, and Julian felt a weight he hadn't experienced in years, The undeniable reality that she had always been the stronger, smarter, and more deliberate one between them. Her gaze was calm, steady, unflinching. No anger. No accusation. No hint of the betrayal he expected. She approached with poise, her hand brushing against the fabric of her dress with a natural elegance. When she stopped a few feet away, she simply nodded, a single, deliberate motion. A gesture that conveyed recognition, acknowledgement, and closure all at once. Julian's mouth opened, searching for words, explanations, excuses, apologies, anything that could fill the sudden emptiness in his chest. But before he could speak, he realized the truth. Words were powerless here. They had been powerless the day she walked out silently, and they were powerless now. Amelia didn't need words. She had already won. Her silence, measured and purposeful, had reshaped his life in ways he could never undo. Her calm departure, her unwavering decision to leave without confrontation, had been a final statement more devastating than any verbal confrontation could have been. She turned gracefully and walked away, her footsteps confident and unhurried. Julian watched, rooted in place, as the woman he had once thought he could control vanished into the crowd, just as she had vanished from his life all those years ago. In that moment, Julian understood fully. Some victories are silent. Some punishments are invisible. And some lessons, like the one Amelia had taught him, last a lifetime. The room returned to its normal rhythm, but Julian's world remained forever altered. The woman who had walked out without a word had done more than leave. She had rewritten the rules of his life, leaving him with nothing but regret, reflection, and the memory of a silence that spoke louder than any words ever could.